I'm going to go ahead and keep it a buck and say that Medieval 3 has to be the next historical Total War, purely historical Total War. It has to be, mainly due to the fact that it is not a tremendous jump from Warhammer 2 or Warhammer 3 to Medieval 3, mainly due to the fact that there are a lot of medieval style assets in Warhammer, such as Britannia. You have the Empire, you have these assets that look and feel very medieval that could easily translate to an entire Medieval 3 type of game. I don't think that we're going to go into anything with gunpowder. I think that Three Kingdoms, the new Rome Remastered, has shown that sword, shield, bow, arrow, all that is still extremely relevant. It is what people want. It is what people are looking for right now. And Medieval 3 just makes sense when it comes to commercial wise, because if they see that Rome Remastered does well as a remastered, we may get a remaster of Medieval 2. And if that becomes popular, Medieval 3 has to be the next thing. Now, I do want Medieval 3 to be purely historical. I don't want no fantasy setting inside of it. And I gave CA a little bit of credit for Rome Remastered, but I probably should be giving credit to the studio that ports Rome and has put it on iPad and tablet and all that, because they're the ones that came to CA and said, let's go ahead and remaster this, and CA gave them the green light. So it wasn't even CA's idea to do this. So I still don't have my hopes up that Medieval 3 will actually happen, but again, they are going to follow the money. So if you put money behind Rome Remastered, if you put money behind Medieval 2 Remastered, then yes, you will get historical Total War Medieval 3. Now, what do I want in this new title? Well, today I have a special guest for you guys. It is a Total War YouTuber, the first collab that I've done with a Total War YouTuber since 2013, when I had my old channel where I did Sunjetsu and I had other videos with people such as Prince of Macedon, Victa, Milk and Cookies, and a few others. But today I have Volound, who is a catalyst for me even pushing and going into this direction where I talk about Total War now on this channel, because I got inspired by his videos, and he is going to give me his take on what he wants from Medieval 3. So I actually can give you mine right now, and then he will give you his. Mine is probably a lot shorter of a list. It's very simple, and it's probably going to be a little bit different than his, because I feel that Three Kingdoms Total War really is the optimal historical Total War game in a lot of aspects that I really care about. Now, the only thing that it is lacking in is in its combat. It's not varied enough in my opinion. There isn't match combat. I have to put mods on for match combat, and so it definitely loses something when it goes into that front. Plus, it still has a lot of fantasy units, plus the general one general army thing, where if you go into romance mode, you can have basically a superhero on your team. Like, all that stuff definitely sucks. But if you play in records, then you'll see that it's essentially just a normal Total War game, but it does need some improvements in the battle mechanics. But when it comes to campaign, when it comes to that front, the 50% of the game that is in combat, it is honestly the best one in my opinion. It is bar none better than Warhammer 2, better than Attila, better than Troy. It has everything you can think of. So what I'm talking about is essentially make Medieval 3, but using Three Kingdoms campaign mechanics, and update the battle mechanics to a better level. Bring back match combat, obviously bring in some gunpowder units that actually make sense. Make sure that we do not have single hero units like at all. No special gimmicky abilities besides Inspire and Rally, which should be the only two that should be in there, unless you find one that is historically accurate, maybe like something religious, because Medieval 3 will have those religious components to it. But basically just use what you already have in Three Kingdoms. The diplomacy in Three Kingdoms is the best the series has ever seen. Use that. The characterization for Three Kingdoms is better than anything that Total War has ever seen, where characters have relationships with each other. They have stories, backstories, friendships, their enemies, their rivals. It grows organically throughout the campaign. If these two guys fight alongside each other for a long time, they become friends. There are a lot of instances like that that make the characters in Three Kingdoms feel the most human out of any Total War title that I've ever seen, as well as everything else you have there. Population, you have the province system, you have the stances, everything that comes in Three Kingdoms campaign wise. I would just use all that in a Medieval 3 setting. Basically just that. Obviously you have to add things like Jihad and Crusades in there, mechanic wise, but besides that, basically use that and update the fighting mechanics. But that's my take on what I would like to see from Medieval 3. Let's go ahead and jump to Volound and see what he thinks.
Alright, my name is Volound, and I have been requested by Sanjetsu to give a quick rundown of what I would like to see in Medieval 3. So I'm happy to oblige, and thanks Sun for your interest, and hopefully I can do a good job here. Alright, so first of all, the soundtrack has not really done it for me in any Total War game after Shogun 2. I liked Jeff Van Dyke and his soundtracks, and I think they were really essential in setting the mood and keeping the pace of the game just right. Everyone always remembers the Rome Total War soundtrack and Medieval 2 soundtrack and the Shogun 2 soundtrack, and this was all work from Jeff Van Dyke between 1999 and 2004, so he was just doing a really good job there for 5 years, and his work is still appearing in Total War games now in 2021 with the remaster, so they really need to just recapture that sound and feel, because it fitted really well with the gameplay and with the way these games felt. So I want more of that. I haven't really appreciated the soundtrack in any Total War game in 10 years now, which is kind of sad, and there's been a lot of Total War games. That's like 6 or 7 Total War games in the past decade, so yeah, more of that Jeff Van Dyke soundtrack. Alright, and that's just the superficial stuff. That's one point I wanted to hit there. Now on to the stuff that matters. For battles, I want there to be no more reliance on the hit point system. I don't like it. It has strange consequences for fights. I went into this a bit for my Testudo video, because in my Testudo video, the degradation, I went over a lot of aspects of the combat and how it has strange results. So the hit points, I think, are behind a lot of that. It has a lot of problems, and I think games that have hit points in them in Total War tend to be inferior Total War games compared to ones that didn't, and this hit point thing is a modern thing, and we're trending towards it and deep into it, and it's regrettable. I don't want there to be any more of that. Another thing is the spreadsheet approach to the gameplay, which factors in with this. So this was also covered in my Tesoro video. I don't like these buttons that add 10% to melee evasion, 50% to range resistance. I don't like clicking buttons to get things like that. I would rather it was actually modelled like Testudo used to be in Rome Total War, where it didn't just put numbers in front of you and you were doing spreadsheet calculations all the time. I don't want to be stuck in my head thinking about numbers and calculations. I want to be looking at my units and feel their nature. I want to look at my heavy infantry and think that they can do well in a melee. I don't want to be looking at stats that I can give them in the middle of the fight all the time. I really don't want to do that anymore. But that's the direction they're going in. There have been games that have done similar things. For example, Homeworld 1 went from a organic ballistics system where projectiles were modelled on their way to the target every step of the way, every tick, every frame, and then in Homeworld 2 they tried to make it easier to simulate combat, so they would do it all with mathematics and then simulate it with animations. So people would notice this. People would notice projectiles bending towards ships, stuff like that, so people have been asking for a return to Homeworld 1's ballistics system, and they did it with the patch for Homeworld 2 and the remaster, and they've made a big point of this with Homeworld 3. They want to return to actually modelling the combat and the ballistics so it's organic and dynamic. They want to move away from what they did previously, and I want Total War to do this. Total War also started out with robust simulations of combat and then moved towards a spreadsheet approach. I'm hoping that they can do something similar and move back to actual robust simulations. Rome Total War infantry combat does this really well. All you have to do is zoom in on a unit of Hastati and a melee with a unit of barbarians and see how they hold their position and stab and get stunned and try to have favourable stabs while avoiding getting caught out of formation. And that's one of the advantages that Roman infantry have in Rome Total War, or are supposed to. Something else I would like to see affecting the battles is a bit more of a reliance on weather and temperature. Medieval 2 had a bit of a Kingdom of Heaven feeling when you went to the... what do you call it again? When you're in the Middle East and you're going on crusades. When you got to the desert, you felt it. So I want more of that, and then also the Crusades expansion for Kingdoms really went deeper into that, and it was really cool. So I want to be able to go on a crusade and go all the way through the Mediterranean from England to the Middle East and land on sand and immediately just have to think, alright, my heavy infantry in their armour, my unhorsed knights standing in plate are going to be really tired really quickly during this fight. So I want them to just stand and face the enemy with their armour and have the lightly armed and armoured skirmishing cavalry and the camels have their arrows just glance off them. That's the asymmetry there, and it was satisfying. And then when you played the Kingdoms expansion, the Crusades campaign, you would feel it as it was developed even better once again. So yeah, I want there to be more weather. Like, playing as England, you would be aware of things like rain, and you would have stakes. I still remember fighting battles that I thought were kind of like what I read of Agincourt, where I would have stakes set up with my longbowmen, and it would be raining, and they would try and advance up hills in the mud into my stakes, and I would try and rain arrows on them as well as I could before the melee started, and I would win some really satisfying fights like that. And Shogun 1 started out, of course, with weather, so there's been a bit of a move away from that, and I want there to be more of these environmental variables like weather and humidity and wind even. Can you imagine if we got wind simulating? If wind, because it's present in naval battles, but can you imagine if you could see your arrows veering down onto their target through the wind because your longbowmen are trained to be able to feel the wind and be more accurate? Imagine if during really windy battles only the best archers could reliably have their arrows land on the target. How cool would that be? You see all these possibilities we could have if there was just more of an emphasis on simulation instead of just spreadsheets and taking this really ham-handed approach. So these are the things that I would notice, that I want to get a chance to notice. Yeah, these are cool variables, and you can maybe like have really ludicrous scenarios during battles where you bend your arrows around hills, things like that. There's all kinds of things that can emerge from these robust systems. And that's the battles section. These are just my thoughts, things I've been thinking about recently. For campaigns, a more interconnected trait system. So with Three Kingdoms, you had a trait system where all the traits seemed to be kind of isolated. Like they would pick up traits quite randomly, it felt like, and you didn't have personalities develop. But in Medieval 2 and Rome Total War, traits seemed to have ways that they could bring other traits into play, and you would have characters develop that had personalities, like they were eccentric, or they were really noble and upright and valiant and brave. Like there were these types of characters, these archetypes that would emerge, and that was just because of the way the trait system worked. Traits would bring other traits into play, into relevance, they would just appear. So like inbred fuck up misfits would tend to accumulate bad traits as a result of their disadvantage. which I always thought was really funny and interesting, and trying to redeem someone that's completely inbred and hopeless, that's just dumb and useless, trying to go into the wind, you know, push against the wind to get them to come out, eventually having made something of themselves. There's all these things that you can do, and I haven't really felt that in any Total War game ever since. That ended with Medieval 2, I think. Something else I would like to see return is naval battles, because that was ambition, that was ambitious. We want ambition. They took naval battles out because they couldn't get them to work, apparently. They couldn't find a way to make them satisfying. They tried with Empire and did a decent job, but that whole game was buggy. They tried with Shogun 2 and it just... they would accumulate at the edge of the map and you would just go around killing them all one by one. It was just a tedious bore, a chore to fight naval battles a lot of the time. And then they once again had another Empire with Rome 2 where the whole game was a buggy mess and it didn't really work there. But then with Attila, I heard that they managed to make combined land and sea invasions work somewhat, so where's this ambition? We had Troy with no naval battles whatsoever. Where is the ambition? Can you imagine playing a Medieval 3 where you have Greek fire and you're just pouring flame onto ships, trying to find ways to get your Greek fire within deployable distance? There's all these cool things that we could have, like imagine Greek fire floating on water during... imagine blocking parts of the sea by just setting it aflame, like something out of Game of Thrones, the Battle of Blackwater. There's all these cool things that we could have that we've never had, things that they never got to work, that they just gave up on. I don't want them to remain given up on. I want to see them return and be built on and expanded and succeeded at, and that's what I think a Medieval 3 needs to do. Succeed where Medieval 2 already succeeded and make it more ambitious. Give us those feelings that we had back then. Yep, alright, hopefully that was coherent, and thanks to Sun for inquiring, and hopefully you found this interesting and can maybe expand on it yourself or give some of your thoughts. Alright, thanks.
I appreciate your points, Volound. Thank you so much for being on this channel and being my first ever collab video on Sunscape and my first ever collab video for Total War since like 2013. So it's been a very, very long time, and I appreciate you wholeheartedly for being here. Thank you so much. Guys, make sure you go ahead and check out Volound's channel. I'm gonna leave a link to it in the description below in the top comment. Go ahead and subscribe for some stellar Total War, real Total War content where he keeps it $100-$150 with you guys. And if you have any ideas, let me know. If you have any thoughts on the ideas we provided, let me know in the comment section below. This is going to be Sunscape and Volound signing off. Take care, guys.